In this video, I'm going to share with you my strategy on cutting Bermuda grass lawns. My yard's Bermuda, and I have a specific strategy that I feel like it makes common sense and keeps my yard looking good. So let's get started with that right now. Today's video is sponsored by Yardbook. If you're in the lawn business and you need a software, go to yardbook.com and sign up for a free account. So we have had virtually no rain in, I'm gonna say, the last 4 weeks. We got a little bit of rain, but I mean almost no measurable rain, and it's looking really dry. And I've had a lot of customers, I do weed control and fertilization. A lot of my customers like, Jason, how come my Bermuda yard is not green? And I tell them what I've done is basically in the fall, when you look at this Bermuda grass, we get down here and look at it, it looks fairly green right here. I mean, it's not super green. Again, we've been in a super dry period. But if I part the waters, if you will, part the grass, you look down in there and it is very much brown. And so even if you pull some grass up, I mean, you can see what it looks like. It's brown, and then maybe the top inch of it is green. But in some situations, I feel like it's less than an inch that's actually green. Well, what does that tell you? If I take off more than an inch, I'm pretty much going to be left with a brown yard. So what does that mean with my mowing strategy? Well, in the fall, if I want it green, I just quit mowing it basically, especially if it's been so dry it's not really growing, or I just take very little off because it's really not growing much, and you take more than that off, it's not going to be green. Now, let's say it gets fall and you're tired of mowing it. Well, you can cut it down and basically turn it brown, and it's going to stun it, and it being slowing down, shorter days, drier weather, all that, you may not have to cut it again. So that's kind of my strategy today. I'm actually going, this will be maybe my last cut of the year. I'm not saying I won't mulch up some leaves and things like that, but last actual time to cut the grass to where I feel like it's going to actually need cut, and I might take it down a little bit further than normal. So let me talk to you about my actual strategy, year-long strategy on mowing Bermuda grass. Sometimes people talk about, Jason, does the grass need Bermuda-like cut short, cut long? I personally think it's very adaptable. I mean, you can make a putting green on a golf course out of it, or you can bale it as hay. I mean, so it will adapt. And I think even in personal lawns, Bermuda grass looks good when it's cut short. It also looks good when sometimes people have it up 4 inches and it still looks good, okay? So there's some pros and cons to each. I mean, if you're cutting it short, I personally like to keep it short, but you're gonna have to mow it much more often and probably going to require more water. When you leave it longer, it probably does a little better job of choking out weeds. It's also insulating the roots from the sun a little bit, so maybe you can get away with a little less water. So here's my strategy. What I do, let's start on the last cut of the year, because that's what we're at today. The last cut of the year, I have been cutting this grass at 2 3/4 inches. On this last cut, I may drop it down to 2 1/2, maybe 2 1/4. I'm not really sure. We'll see how the mower does as I get out there and start cutting. But I'm basically telling the grass, I'm done with you, I don't want to cut anymore. So in my area, I'm in Alabama, that's typically sometime in October. Then let's say it's March of the following year and I'm ready to start cutting, and I've got all that dormant Bermuda. What am I going to do with it? Well, I think if you're gonna bag it at some point in time, and you don't have to, but that would be a good time to bag it, because you're basically getting all that dormant grass and just getting rid of it, okay? I think it's a misconception. Sometimes people think that that actually is gonna turn green again, where that is just in the way. You're gonna have new green shoots start popping up lower to the ground. So you try to get rid of that dormant grass, and the quicker you do that, it's going to allow the sunlight to get down to the roots and start greening up your lawn. So if you want a greener lawn earlier in the spring, typically scalping your lawn, and I'm not saying you got to scalp it to the dirt, but getting rid of some of that dormant grass where the sunlight gets down the root is going to allow you to get a greener lawn faster, even more importantly than, say, fertilizer will. And I'm certainly not anti-fertilizer. I'm just saying in the spring, oftentimes the ones that are greener are the ones that scalped it earlier in the year. So that's what I do. So let's say it's at 2 3/4, last cut of the year, get it down to 2 1/2, maybe 2 1/4. So then fast forward to next March, gonna take it down even further. And my goal is to get it down to 1 1/2 inches. So let's say it's at 2 1/4 on that first cut in March, and I get it down to 2. And then the next cut, I take it down to 1 3/4, and next cut, you cut it down to 1.5 inches. Now you can do that in one time. You can go from 2 1/4 to 1.5 inches in one time, but you can imagine there's gonna be a lot of dormant Bermuda. And if you're bagging it, you're gonna be in for a big job. I got 4 acres, so I'm not bagging it, but you can just mulch anyway. So if you want to take it down in stages, that's fine. But my goal is to get it down to 1.5 inches because that's as low as my lawnmower will go. And I try to keep it at 1.5 inches. So what I'll do, I'll mulch it about every, well, in the spring, April, May, you can probably get by cutting it every 10 days or so. But as it starts growing, and weather starts getting hot, you get rain, put fertilizer on it, it really starts growing. And so to keep it at 1.5 inches, I'm having to mow it about every 5 or 6 days. And let's say that carries me till June. And by June, if it's raining and it's gotten hot, it's really growing, I'm probably personally not able to keep it at 1.5 inches because it's hard to mow 4 acres every 5 days. I mean, you could do it, but it's just very time consuming. So if you have a smaller yard, you want to mow it very regular, every 4 days, let's say, you can probably keep it 1.5 inches. For me, that's about the time in June where I start raising it. So I'll go up 1/4 inch, so it'll be 1 3/4. I might can cut it on that for a couple weeks, and then I might have to go to 2 inches. And I can cut it on that for a couple weeks, and I might have to go 2 1/4. And fast forward all the way to August, and now I'm up to 2 3/4 inches. But my goal is not to be stubborn and say, I'm just gonna cut 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. You can do that if you want to cut very frequently. But if you get into August and you're only cutting it once a week, and that may sound like a lot, but even once a week, keeping an 1.5 inches, you're probably gonna really start to stress out the color of the lawn because it's growing so fast. And of course, the rule of thumb is you don't cut more than 1/3 of the grass blade off at a time. But the grass will tell you. I mean, you can just look at it and see, wow, I just cut all the color out of that lawn, and you're gonna stress out your lawn and potentially leave some big brown spots. Now, it will most likely recover, but it's not very sightly. So that's my strategy. And then by September, it's gonna slow down a little bit. And that's the point where, again, if you want to keep it green, you're gonna have to barely cut any grass off at all. Now that's in my area. It may vary a little bit depending on where you live, depending on year to year, temperatures, rain amounts, things like that. But this year been particularly dry this fall. So to cut it low is just saying, hey, I don't want you green again until next year. And that's basically what you're gonna do. And that's pretty much what I'm doing today. I'm gonna give you some mowing footage as I take care of my lawn today. I've got this big area here. It's basically like a soccer field for my kids. And we get out here, I hit golf balls and things. But you can see the leaves are starting to fall, which doesn't bother me because that means cooler weather. And I just think, to me, instead of getting out here and blowing leaves forever, or certainly not raking leaves, to me, I can just mulch them up, okay? I would rather run over this even through November if I need to, every 2 or 3 weeks, to keep the leaves mulched up versus bagging them versus anything else. Again, if you got a small yard, you want to bag them, that's fine. But mulching does work pretty well. I've got a little side discharge chute block on mine. But even without the chute block down and just side discharging, it still does a pretty good job of mulching them up, and sure beats raking or blowing them, in my opinion. And it's worth mentioning, because I run a weed control and fertilization business, if you hadn't gotten your fall pre-emergent down, you want to do that. I typically use Spectacle Flow and mix 2,4-D with it and Simazine. But you want to do that and get that watered in before we start getting these super cold nights. You don't have to beat those nights, but that's usually when when you start feeling those cool nights, which we already been having, that's typically when a lot of the cool season weeds are going to germinate. Now, again, that may vary a little bit based on the rain or lack of rain that we have. If you don't want to use Spectacle Flow, it's a little bit on the expensive side. You can use Prodiamine. It's not going to give you quite as good a control on your cool season weeds, but it's also effective and certainly better than doing nothing, because you know, if you have a Bermuda lawn, if you do nothing your Bermuda lawn, it will most likely be taken over with weeds in just a couple of years. Let's get started mowing. Of course, I'm wearing ear and eye protection as I mow. See, I'm cutting it at 2 1/4, so this is a 1/2 inch lower than usual, and it's definitely scalping it down just a little bit. But again, I'm not really that concerned about it. End up with a little bit of brown spots because it's going to be turning brown anyway soon as it goes dormant. We get going down in the low 40s this weekend. And you can see it does a pretty good job mulching up the leaves. I mean, I'm not saying it's as good as a bagging mower, or you can't get out here and rake them, but I mean, I'm very happy with that, and I know there are probably millions more leaves that are going to fall in my yard, at least hundreds of thousands, I would say, because I've got a lot of deciduous trees. So anyway, this is what I'm doing. It's working pretty good. I'm going to keep mowing, and then we'll wrap up the video. All right, I got the grass cut, dry and dusty, a lot of leaves. We could really use some rain. Appreciate you watching the video. There's over 1,000 on the channel. If you hadn't subscribed, I would encourage you to do that. Also, if you want to get in a lawn business, weed control and fertilization, mowing, mosquito spraying, go to lawncarelife.com. There's resources for you there. Also, if you want to go to the Equip Expo this year, if you hadn't signed up, you can still get half off your ticket by using the discount code Lawn Care Life. That's all one word, Lawn Care Life, when you sign up for the Equip Expo coming up in Louisville, Kentucky in a couple of weeks. See you guys in the next video.